Hi guys, in this video I'm going to walk you through the technique of playing against a backspin ball, in this case a medium backspin ball that if I left the ball alone would slowly roll back off the floor towards the camera. How to produce or kill the spin on the ball so that although you look like you're chopping the ball with quite a heavy chop, what you're actually giving the opponent is really more or less a float to a very light backspin to a slight top spin, depending on exactly how much spin is on the ball. What I found was in this particular one, there was a medium amount of backspin on the ball, and when I was actually doing the chopping motion, I was actually producing a light backspin. So I was actually reversing the spin to the extent that I could actually turn that medium backspin coming at me into a very light backspin of my own. Whereas when I actually, and you'll see it later on in the video, when I use a slightly different technique, the more normal technique, the ball is going back with a little bit of topspin as I would expect. So in this video I'm again using my faster blade, the Teemo Ball Spirit blade, still using the Stiga Destroyer on the backhand, no sponge, so fairly standard. And so we'll just start having a little look at the technique videos themselves, and I'll walk and talk you through my thoughts on the actual technique starting now. Okay, so we're starting with the backhand push here. From the speed of the swing you can see that I'm really trying to dig under the ball with the pips. It's not an extended follow through, and this is important, that being close up to the table, although you don't want to make the swing jerky, you don't want to jerk it to a stop and poke at the ball, you also don't want to have a big extensive follow through whenever you swing faster at the ball, because otherwise, being this close to the table, if you take a big follow through, it's quite likely you're not going to actually be recovered in time for the next ball. So although the swing must be quick, you certainly don't want to muck around with it. What you're seeing here is now me just varying to give you a bit of contrast, so you can see from the chop ball there to the more normal just push at the ball, and the chop producing a light backspin, the more normal push, you can see from the flight of the ball how fast it dips, keeping the top spin. And the flight of the ball here is really the giveaway on what's happening. My heavier chopping motion produces a much flatter trajectory. The top spin, or the normal push, produces that dipping trajectory once it gets over the net. The overall action though isn't a lot different. It's really just a slight change in the bat angle and really that sharper feeling that you're trying to brush under the ball. And we're just about to go into a slow-mo, and we'll just talk you through the slow-mo version here. So again, you can see I'm playing in my forehand stance. Really no turn of shoulders required. The bat comes back towards the body, and the forearm and wrist act to snap the bat underneath the ball, and we're trying to basically bend those pips and brush underneath it, and you're getting then a very flat trajectory because of the light amount of backspin on the ball. It would be difficult to drop this very, very short when you're swinging that hard. Having said that, it didn't jump off my bat like I would expect with a quicker blade either, and you can see that here on the forehand side too. Although I'm giving quite a fast swing at the ball with a faster blade, same long pips but a faster blade, I was half expecting the ball to really jump and fly off my bat and be a lot harder to control. It really wasn't that much different. I think because the bending of the pips actually takes a lot of the impact of the blade away and slows the ball down. So by coming underneath and brushing and bending the pips, you really do act a little bit like a shock absorber itself. Occasionally you'll see the ball jump off my bat, both on the backhand and forehand sides. That's usually what's happened when I've failed to bend the pips and got a more solid contact, and then you lose that shock absorbing quantity, and the ball tends to fly high and faster, and consequently tends to go long off the table and fly off the end of the table. So it's important to keep the brushing. Here in the forehand, really all that's changed, if you go back to say the standard pushing video that I've done in the past and have a look, you can really see the swing speeds up, the bat's coming a little bit more underneath it, the contact is more like an inverted chop for a heavy chop. It's really not so much different from it, perhaps not quite as skimmy, not quite as thin a contact. You make it too thin with these pips and you're likely to actually to have it just kind of slide off the bat completely. So we can't go quite as extreme as an inverted push, but we can get quite a good result and a light amount of backspin here, as I said. So a little bit more than I thought. Now looking in the slow-mo, again just bending from the waist and down from the shoulder, taking the bat back, and you can see it's actually coming back to around the end of my torso, bringing it back, and not using my arm to bring it back on my shoulder, using the shoulder turn to bring it back, and snapping forward and under, and sliding through. There we go. And let's have a now look at the front view version on the backhand side. Now the idea here is the more it kind of looks like your normal push, the better off you are. So although you're never going to make it look exactly the same, by blurring the lines between your normal push and this heavier float type push, you're going to be better off because it's going to make it harder for your opponent to read. And of course the action here looks very much like how I'd push with my inverted side. So to an unsuspecting opponent who's not really paying attention, if he doesn't notice I've changed or I'm using the black side, the pip side, he may think I'm actually chopping very, very heavy and can get a trick there. The other thing this does is it actually, because you're brushing under the ball, the sound of it's a little bit different. It actually is more of a muted sound. It's not as clunky as the normal long pips with no sponge sound. So again, to an unsuspecting opponent, the sound's not going to give it away as much either. And now I'm just going from that chop to just my normal push forward there, you can see, going heavy and then just going normal and just like there, yep. And just again trying to show you just the contrast between the strokes themselves. To a trained eye, it looks kind of like, to me here, I can usually pick the difference quite well. So sometimes it's better to actually try and look like you're going underneath and not brush it so much. Adding a little bit of side swing, side swinging of your bat into the stroke, so it's not a pure forward. That will make things a little bit harder. Anything like that can confuse the opponent a bit more and make it that little bit harder to read. A good thing about this particular stroke, the harder stroke, is it does go a little bit faster. Not super fast and super hard to control, but a little bit quicker, which gives your opponent less time to react and puts him under a little bit more pressure, which is important when you're going to be standing right up at the table. You don't want your opponent having time to load up and hit big shots at you. And just see here, bat just goes back and really slides underneath, bending those pips. And we'll now just have a little look at the forehand front view. Again, here on, it's more evident how my right shoulder really dips for this forehand version, and I'm really getting some wrist snap and some forearm snap to help come under that ball and really keep it low. The ones where you do see it jump occasionally is where I've not bent the pips enough. And on the whole though, not as difficult a shot as I thought it would be with this faster blade. And still using the free arm, still trying to stay relatively light on my feet, moving the ball around. And again, although I'm doing this over and over, this is the type of forehand stroke that you would mix in with the rest of your game. You'd mix it in with the little shovel push, you'd mix it in with a roll, then do a couple of these, mix it in with your inverted side, all consciously making a decision yourself on what you're doing, and all designed to make life harder for your opponent, give him more things to read. So it shouldn't be necessarily something done at random where you're not keeping track, because it's very important for you to keep track of what you're doing. not so much an instinctual kind of thing as it is a controlled decision of, yes, I'm going to play this and do this shot. Occasionally you'll be under pressure and be forced to play certain shots, and you won't always have a lot of time to choose. And in those cases, although you may not be able to make a conscious decision so much about what shot to play, you should at least play a shot, get the ball on the table, and have a fair idea of what shot you've played, what the result and what the effect will be on the opponent, and that will help you as well. So again, in this technique, it's nothing fancy. I could add some side spins and side swings to further confuse your opponent, but this is just the basic vanilla technique. So that's the basic technique demonstration. Just to finish here, just a little point that I'd just like to make is that in these basic technique demonstrations that you're kind of seeing here, I'm really not trying to do anything fancy. I'm not trying to confuse or bamboozle my opponent with flourishes in the swing, with extra complexity in my swing at all. It's very much just the basic vanilla stroke of this is how you do it without any frills. Now, in my matches, if you've watched any of my recent matches where I've been playing close up to the table, you'll notice that really when I'm pushing and chop blocking, I don't actually use a lot of side swing movements and frills in there. At the moment, that's because I've never really developed it in my game. It'll be interesting in the months to come as I stay close up to the table and get a little bit more comfortable in the role and a few more of the shots playing up close. I may try and work that into my game a little bit more, a little bit of the side spin swipes to try and add a little bit more wobble and a little bit more drift to the ball. And it'll be interesting to see how that kind of works out in the future. But at the moment, looking at my videos that you've seen so far of me playing recently close up to the table, it's possible to see that it's not really necessary to play a fairly high level game. I'm doing it without any real fancy flourishes at all. And what that means is with someone with my basic technique, which is moderately okay forehand technique, good backhand technique, very sound twiddling and good feel for the twiddle itself, not great footwork and not great speed, someone with roughly my characteristics can produce that level of play. So if you can improve on me in any of those areas and match me in the others, well, you're going to probably play a slightly higher level game than I am. So the pimples, if you can get to the level of usage of the pimples where you're comfortable and it's more difficult for your opponent than it is for you, they really do work in with the rest of your game to lift up your game. And it's not until you get to the very high level where the sheer power of your opponent becomes more of a factor than your pips that you really have to start being more and more aggressive.